appreciate everyone showing up this evening for our panel on managing enterprise deal. It's I just have to just take a second just to thank everyone for showing up this evening. I think this is pretty amazing. We've been doing this meetup since last August, kind of on a whim, thinking we'd get maybe 20 people to show up. And that first meetup that we had in that big conference room over there had about 100 people trying to shove in the heat of summer. Not that pleasant, so we moved out here to the bigger area. But since then we've had some pretty good crowds, but this is the first time we actually had not only over 100, but we had 120 people sign up. So thank you. This has been just an amazing story around people interested in learning and understanding more about enterprise sales, but also building a community where we can all just figure out what we're all doing and how to get better at it. And that's what's really exciting about what we've been trying to do here with this meetup. Not just to have events, but to be able to network, to have a true community where we can each help each other out, share some stories, some tips, and that we can also learn as well, because as anyone will tell you that's been in sales for a while, the way that we were doing sales even 5 years ago, much less a decade or more, has radically changed, and this is really an opportunity for us to kind of surface up those things that are working. Because enterprise sales is one of the toughest journeys one can take. Trying to sell to big companies is, well, I won't go there, but if anyone's into the whole social media thing, at least I'm big into the Twitter thing. You can follow me at Mark S. Birch and read my annoying tweets, or you can read the much better tweet that at sales_NYC, #NYCESM. I've also been warned that if people do not clean up, I will be beaten mercilessly by my staff. So please do use the recycling bins and trash bins for your stuff. Cleanliness is next to something or other. Let me think. What else am I going to talk about? Oh, we have some amazing sponsors. One of whom is Workbench, which provides us this wonderful space. If you have any questions about Workbench and what they do from the Enterprise Growth Accelerator perspective, our wonderful Brooklyn Coates, who's waving there to the side, do introduce yourself. She's amazing, and she helps actually manage a lot of these events, including this wonderful event. Also want to give a shout out to McCarter English. They're actually going to be a big part of next month's meetup, negotiating the deal. So definitely some really interesting stuff around how to help startups when it comes to legal matters. Bowery Capital has been a long-time sponsor of this meetup. Great VC that focuses on sales and marketing, technology companies. Bet's Recruiting, who was generously sponsoring our drinks for this evening, and is an incredible recruiting firm for sales folks. And with that, I'm going to give it up to our moderator, Mike Pierce, and everyone on this wonderful panel will introduce themselves, and we'll get going. Talking about managing the enterprise deal.
Hope everybody's doing good this evening. Again, Mark, thank you for the kind intro. Actually, wasn't that great, but we'll work on that. Big deal. Anyhow, we won't get into that tonight. First and foremost, just to echo what Mark said, it's really awesome that we hit 100 tonight. I think this has been like a vanity goal for us, just to have this many people that are stoked about enterprise sales. I personally love cold calling. I'm like that geek that has been doing it for the last 12 years and gets so amped on it. So I'm really stoked that we've got this many like-minded people in one room to talk about something so in depth. It's fun. So tonight, as Mark alluded to, we're going to be talking about managing the enterprise deal. When it comes to managing the enterprise sales deal, there are like so many nuances involved, right? I talk with a lot of my colleagues, and we talk about how can it be a process versus all these nuances and really the art of accomplishing this, right? Anytime you're going out there and trying to do like a 5-figure, let alone 6-figure or 7-figure deal, there's a lot of nuts and bolts that come into it, and a lot of these little nuances and all these little traps that you just don't think about. And that's what we're gonna try to tackle here tonight. So we have a wonderful panel. I'm really hyped that all these guys have decided to join us this evening. With that, I'm gonna start with Glenn here, and I'm gonna ask you guys to just introduce yourself, tell us who you're with, and a little bit about what you guys do day in, day out.
Hi, my name is Glenn Donovan. I'm actually an independent consultant who works with startups to help them go to market in both from a sales and marketing standpoint in early phases. I'm here tonight because I've worked closely with NHash. I love those guys. Known Mark for 14, 15 years now. And I'm basically an old war dog enterprise sales and marketing type. So we'll get more into it as the panel, just kick off the panel.
Hi, I'm Jason Liebowitz. I'm Vice President Sales of LiveWorld. We're a social media solutions company, essentially for Fortune 1000 companies who are looking for everything from strategic to consultative assistance at the highest levels of social media down to tactical and day-to-day deployment. What we do is we help them really scale the voice of the customer experience, so even though it's essentially in an impersonal venue, it still seems like a one-to-one type of experience.
Hi, I'm Dan Contento. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Yieldmo. We are, as we like to say, saving the world from bad mobile ads. We all know there are plenty of them out there. We work with about 120 publishers, including CNN, Fox News, to create new mobile ad space on their sites, and then we work with advertisers and agencies to fill those places with ads that you hopefully will love. And so I manage the publisher development teams as well as the ad sales teams at Yieldmo.
I'm Brian Manning. I'm at ZocDoc. I work with large hospitals and health systems to bring them on kind of at scale onto ZocDoc, so patients can easily get into those doctor's offices all across the country. And I'm here because Mike dragged me here.
Yeah, for the sake of full disclosure, Brian and I both work at ZocDoc, and he was kind enough to join me tonight. I owe you a couple of beers later. Okay, so I want to start very broad, and then we'll kind of narrow in and get a little bit further into the process. And Brian, I'm going to start with you since you've got the mic in your hand. You know, one of the key things when it comes to all these enterprise sales deals is you've only got so much bandwidth, right? You've got like 50, 60 hours in a work week in all reality, probably most of us work. My question to you, Brian, is when you're dealing with these larger deals, how many deals do you think a high-level business-to-business sales professional can actually effectively manage?
Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on your quota and kind of the goal that you want to hit, and you can kind of back into it from there based on the deal size. But I think a good marker for most people is have a pipeline, a realistic pipeline that's 4x what you want to do that year. And obviously we all have different deal sizes, so that that could be different. But I mean, for me, that means working pretty aggressively 9 or 10 deals all the time.
Got it. And Dan, I'm going to ask you to pass the mic over to Dan, and I'm going to ask you, Dan, same question. I mean, at Yieldmo, you've actually got a sales team of guys who are doing this high-level business-to-business sales. When you're training, when you're putting together the infrastructure, you're kind of getting all these guys ready, what do you normally put in there as effective like pipeline management when they're managing these deals?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, so for my perspective, I was spent a good chunk of my career at Yahoo, where I, for a period of a couple years, managed only one account, and that was HP, and it was like $50 million a year account. So I have really seen the benefits of going deep with single accounts and prioritizing what's really important. So at a startup, obviously we don't have that luxury to assign one person to one account. We go much broader than that. But I find that by focusing in on your 5 or to 10 opportunities, like Brian said, that are the most ideal customer and the most valuable, I think that's energy best spent.
Got it. Fair. Good answer. Just as a follow-up to that, I mean, there's obviously, you got to back into what your quota is, right? You got to be realistic about that. But let's say you're a guy that's running a startup and you're kind of the lone wolf out there, kind of the chief rainmaker, you know, the guy putting it all together, going out and trying to like raise funds and everything like that. What realistically would you put as like a high watermark and saying like, hey, you should have this many deals, this should kind of be the goal that you're going for, if you were talking to coaching somebody in that scenario?
Good question. And at a startup, like really, you need a number of deals to figure out what is your ideal customer, which ones you're going to be able to scale. You know, with our guys, when we bring them on board, if within the first 3 months they have one deal that's good, 5 deals through 6 months, again, is good and on track. I don't know, I don't love the idea of looking at your quota and backing into it. I really prefer to, you know, to look at to look at the opportunity, look at what you're selling, and approach it on a client-by-client basis. You know, think about how valuable could this be to XYZ company, HP, AT&T, Verizon, et cetera, all companies that we're working with. I think if we would have thought that we needed to have a certain number of deals in a certain number of time, that may have limited how big we could have been with some of our largest deals.
Just real quick. I think at a really early stage, it makes sense to cast a much wider net, though. Because the fact is, if it's really new, if what you're doing is really, really innovative, there is low-hanging fruit out there. And I think there's a certain amount of time where you should scramble to find that low-hanging fruit and the quick deals that you get done that are waiting out there for you.
Got it. I'm gonna pass the mic over here to Jason, and I'm gonna shift gears a little bit, talking a little bit more about actually managing that process. Jason, I first want to ask, how many salespeople do you manage?
I currently have 2.
Okay.
And by the way, my response to that is it really depends. Before we put like a hard and fast number on anything, reality is you're going to have some things that are going to be far more transactional, and you're going to have some things that could be a lot more developmental. And depending on what your product mix, what your offering is, and really, you know, look, I mean, there are times where it could be one conversation and an SOW, and it could be 3 years worth of work, and you sweat it through. And you know, I think probably what everyone in this room realizes is there's no hard fast rule as to how quickly a deal can materialize these days. And you know, there's a lot of clutter, there's a lot of confusion, there's a lot of competition, and you know, I think if you just peg it down to a very finite number, you're kind of missing out on encouraging behaviors that you want your team to have. You want them to close, but if they're exhibiting the right behaviors, everything else should come into place as well. Okay, onward, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Actually, kind of a follow-up, and you kind of actually took me to the next area that I was hoping we would go. Talking about when it comes to managing salespeople, you know, managing those behaviors is probably like one of the most effective things, and I won't ask you guys necessarily to speak to that, but maybe that's something that we can all agree upon just because I said it. But I guess the key question is, and I'm curious, especially from a sales leadership perspective, when it comes to managing the deal, I believe, and I talk to a lot of my colleagues, like there's a certain art form associated with it, as well as a certain process that has to be followed. And so I'm curious, from a sales leadership perspective, do you believe in doing like a hard chart of your process? Like, hey, you've got to tick this box to get to this box to get to this box? Or do you kind of let that art form take over? I'm just curious of how you manage your team.
I'm actually moving towards a more finite type of process, only because I have 2 salespeople. It's a pretty big company, a pretty big country. You know, we need to hit some boxes, whether it be, you know, evaluating how you're qualifying someone and taking someone down the process. So I'm actually going a little bit more towards the process than the gut. Again, you know, you know, everyone is going to, you know, look, I don't believe in cookie cutter salespeople. There's some companies that thrive on that. Everyone has a different strength that they're bringing to the process and can bring to nurturing or closing a deal. And frankly, I'm less concerned about checking those boxes than making sure that they are involving an entire organization in getting a deal done, rather than thinking that it's one person and one person only. Especially if you're talking about enterprise deals. You're dealing with Fortune 100 and you're dealing with or Fortune 1000. I mean, you're dealing with billions of dollars in market cap. To think that one person can really, take something from start to finish, it's kind of naive. I mean, you need an organization behind it. So I'm more interested in that than all the boxes being checked. So scientifically.
Got it. So to follow up on that, so you're saying that, to quote you, I mean, you're naive if you approach the sales process with a large company and expect like one person can take you through the.
Yeah, and it's not when you were at Yahoo, you were one, but how big was the organization supporting HP? It was large.
Very large.
Yeah, I mean, it's if you're talking 7-figure, 8-figure, or frankly even 6-figure deals, depending on what that means to to your company, you don't want to go to bat alone. It's like you take credit for a close. You sure as hell don't want to be the one taking credit for the loss. So you want to bring in as many of the necessary tools and people who can fill the right roles in order for you to bring it along.
So you bring up something interesting. I guess we kind of started talking about sponsors, and actually I'll ask Glenn this question. Glenn, you've got an interesting vantage point in the sense of you work with a lot of startups. You work with a handful of companies, we'll say, and so my question for you is, when it comes to, my first question for you is, do you believe in that artistic effect, if you will, or kind of more the process oriented when it comes to managing the deal? And second, how do you turn finding that decision making team into a process? How do you chart that out? How do you go in and teach a sales guy like John down the street there? How do I teach him, hey, here's how you map out that decision making team?
That's a really big question, and I want to try and break it down in a couple different parts. So, first of all, it's both creative and process. You can't do one or the other. You have to be creative. You have to understand the differences in each prospect and client that you're dealing with. But if you don't have a method to your madness, you're kidding yourself and you're going to fail. If you don't think there are discrete steps that you need to pass through in order to get a deal done, you're just not managing your sales process properly. You need to do proposals. You need to do demonstrations. You need to do discovery. You need to have executive contact, right? You need to do all of these things that are going to help you build the proposal and then help, on the other side, help the client build the business case. So I don't think it's an either or question. I think there's a lot of creativity that has to come into the process, because there's some data points that are interesting to consider here, right? So if you look at how companies perceive brands, 50 to 70% of brand perception and customer loyalty are driven by the rep relationship and the impression the rep makes. Think about that. That person you're putting in front of the prospect is driving more of the value perception than your price and your product features, right? Why is that? Because the human element is incredibly important, because it's really complex what's going on. So here's another data point. In an organization, let's call it a mid-sized enterprise, say 500 million or better in revenue, right? To spend $25,000, this is at a Boozel and Hamilton study that was done. The average $25,000 transaction is touched by 22 people in that organization. 22 people. And most of them you're not going to meet. A lot of them are looking at your proposal and you don't even know they have it, by the way, right? So you have to anticipate what's going on in the organization. Now, what was the rest of the question? There was another question bit there. But I think those are two very important, ground level truths to keep in mind when you do this, right?
No, that's very fair. That's very fair. You bring up a great point. I guess shifting gears a little bit, and what I was trying to get to is this concept of not only finding a sponsor, but really charting out the entire decision-making team. To your point, I think you said 22 people touched 25.
I'll tell you right now, the book to buy is Rick Page's Hope is Not a Strategy. It is, nothing's been said since then about selling that is new. And what you need to do is map out the organization, the decision-making processes, both formally and informally, understand who's zooming who, right? who's winning, who's losing politically. One of the very helpful things to do is find other projects that have been done. A great thing to ask one of your sponsors. So have you ever done a project like this before? How did you build support for that? How did you get done with the organization, right? So now, you can have all these methodologies and processes. Go read Rick Page's book. You'll learn how to chart out decision-making processes. You'll learn what your uncovered bases are on the people you should go sell to. But ultimately, the thing that I think you really have to tune into is what's going on with the buyers, with the customer, not you. One of the dangers in having this process focus and all these steps people want to go through, you spend too much time thinking about your process instead of the client's process. See, they have a way they do things. They're not calling you back, not because they don't like you, it's because they haven't figured out how to advance anything with you yet, right? So they don't have anything to tell you yet. So if you think more about how can I help this person advance this idea in their organization in a way that would be good for them, instead of, I showed them a demo, I got them a proposal, why isn't he getting back to me? You're gonna be in a much more powerful place to start to understand, then how do I influence that organization, right? How do I actually take this group of people, this informal decision-making process, and the formal process of the organization and win my way through it? The last thing, and I don't know if you said it or somebody else said it, any of you who think you can take an organization that's $5 billion in revenue and use some little startup, and you're gonna go control how they buy from you, good luck. So Brian is absolutely correct. 3 to 5x the pipe. That's what you've got to have at any given time. Because you're riding a bucking bronco, you're not driving a car, right?
All right, look at the audience, see if we can interject. How's that?
Sorry?
You weren't looking at the audience, so that you don't know if anybody wants to raise their hand and ask a question, or you don't want anyone to ask it.
That's a wonderful point, and I didn't really give the housekeeping at the beginning of all this. Typically what we do is about 15 minutes to the end, we'll go ahead and we'll do a full-on Q&A. So we kind of try to bank all that until the very end. I apologize for not saying that.
But doesn't she get to ask the question now?
You do get to ask a question now. I'm not going to be asked sticklers.
Yeah, I mean, whoever's managed a sales team, you have to have your salespeople have success. So if they don't have a big pool to draw on, and they're waiting for that one kahuna deal at the end of the year, they're gonna die.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of a startup, is there's often so much white space out there. Absolutely. Yeah, you have to allow a sales rep to build a pipeline that works for them. I was an early stage employee at ZocDoc, at least for the business that we run, and it was all white space. It was wonderful. I had a pipeline probably within 3 months of probably 80 hospitals, and I was working all 80, right? Not very effectively, but I was working all 80. And now as I've gotten better at it and figured out, where to find good leads and how to get through the process, like I said, it's down to 10.
Right, but as a manager, you want your people to have success. If they don't have success, they'll die. And they won't ever become a good salesperson.
Absolutely.
That is absolutely right. That is absolutely right. So I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. You brought up sponsor, so I kind of want to interject and talk a little bit more, flesh out the decision-making team. Just to define sponsor, and I think we're all on the same page here, that's generally your executive sponsor who's going to help usher the deal through. It's a guy that you can call at the 11th hour and say, hey, can you help me with legal? Can you help me with that? It's the guy that a lot of times make kind of that first point of contact. My question is, and just kind of have the conversation around this, when you're putting together who that decision-making body is, what other personas are you guys looking for? Brian, I'll ask you this since you got the mic. What other personas are you looking for beyond that executive sponsor as part of that decision-making body?
Other people that are going to get a bonus if my product works. That's basically what I'm looking for. And aside from that, I'm also looking for a project manager. So usually I'll have a C-level executive that's made the decision that kind of I talk to very rarely, and the project manager that I meet with at least once a week to get the deal to closure. The project manager is like incredibly helpful because you're not going to get to the CFO or the COO or the CEO when you want to as much.
Can you talk or elaborate on how you work that project manager role?
How do I get the project manager?
Well, how do you actually, once you have that relationship, what do you actually do to not exploit it?
So we set up a weekly meeting and map out exactly how they buy, and what are all the hurdles, and put it on a spreadsheet, and all the hurdles and all the meetings that have to happen, all the approvals that have to happen, and then help that project manager manage that process. I track it for that person. We have the weekly meetings every week. and give them recommendations based on other clients I have and how they've gotten through their own processes. But the point is, like, you gotta make it easy. Like, I hear that over and over again when we do like deal retrospectives with our clients. They say, like, the thing you did is you made it easy to buy. It's really hard for a Fortune 10 company to buy something, really hard. And your job as a salesperson is to facilitate that.
So, and Dan, I'll ask you on this. So when it comes to, are there any, first question, are there any personas beyond what Brian had identified? Because I know you work in a different verticals, so you might have something that I'm not thinking of.
Yeah, you know, I think it's similar in that you mentioned the project manager, the person who's going to actually be using your product. That's definitely someone that we try to identify because we need to get the renewal, not just the initial sale. It's the renewal and then the ultimate expansion of that buy. So it's really important for us to identify those people, figure out what their needs are, because while they may not be the one who's pushing the initial deal through, they are going to be the ones who are important for us to actually be successful with the client.
I'm curious, so like once you identify, like once you've got these personas, you kind of got this decision-making body, you know, you've got all these different folks lined up, you've got their LinkedIn profiles, like, you know, hot links. What are you doing to build that relationship? I'm curious, like give me 2 tactics that you use or you encourage your salespeople to do that build that relationship with people in that decision-making body.
Well, again, Brian mentioned who's going to get the biggest bonus if this works. I think that goes to identifying the personal win that these individuals can achieve if this works. It's not always money. Sometimes it's you know, in our case, it might be putting them up for an industry award or something like that for the work that we've done together. Something that's going to bring them recognition, promotion, etc. So I think that's what we're trying to figure out there is all those key people. What are they going to get out of this if it's successful, or how will it help them personally be successful?
Got it. So shifting gears, I guess, and going a little bit further into the sales process. We've got the decision-making team. You know, we're managing like 10 deals effectively. Like I'm the ideal salesperson, salesman of the year. Here I come. So Brian touched on something that I find very interesting, and that's actually mapping out the buying cycle and process for these companies. I'm curious, like, what tactics do you use to find that buying cycle and process? Again, different in each company, in each industry, but it is something that we try to map out, actually write out and create a living, breathing document of how we think this company will buy us, what products we need to achieve success with that product, who are the key influencers in that buy. And this is something that we share across our team so that product and account management and the salesperson are all on the same page about what we need to deliver there. In terms of mapping out that process with a specific company, I think that comes as you build relationships with champions, with sponsors who will give you insight into that process. Got it. And Jason, I'm actually going to pose a very similar question to you. I mean, let's say like I'm a brand new sales guy in your organization. What are you going to tell me to do in the sense of, and I'm actually very interested to hear your answer, given that you're kind of going from more of this kind of free will, just do what you want to do, not more process oriented.
That.
Well, sorry, you're right. But when it comes to,
was that interpreted? Is that what I said?
No.
Okay.
Bad interpretation, I apologize. But when it comes to the buying cycle and process, like what are 1 or 2 tactics that you would encourage like a brand new sales guy on your team to do to find that out?
Well, the first thing I think anyone needs to do, especially if you're dealing with public companies, know when their fiscals end. And then you've got to back out and say, okay, if they're working on a 12/31 year end, they're essentially going to be locked somewhere. Not even if they're organized, they're going to be locked in the early part of November. If they're disorganized, they'll be flying by the seat of their pants through the end of December. But if you want to affect change as to what they're doing with current vendors or current process, it means you really need to have that impact at least 6 months prior to the end of fiscal. Otherwise, they're going to be shifting towards renewal cycle at that point with current vendors, unless something's completely awry. So first things first, it's not know what you are selling. It's not know our business. It's know the business that your people of the people that you're trying to do business with. Because if you don't understand their priorities, you don't understand where their business cycles, then it doesn't really matter. What a compelling product you have, what great rate you have, or what anything else is. If there's no money available and the decision-making process is already sailed, then you're back to that hope strategy.
Got it. And so again, going a little bit further into the overall sales process, I think once you hit a certain deal size, right, things change, right? Obviously, if I'm selling an organization $100 a month subscription versus trying to go in for that six-figure deal, things can become a little bit different. With that said, when you're going for those higher deals, Glenn, to you, I mean, how often is consensus decision making? How often is that prevalent in these types of deals?
Well, I'm sorry, I have to go back to another point. I know you hate when people do this, but talking about personas involved in the sales process, it's very important that you identify something called a coach, who's often not your sponsor. It's an interested party in the process who has a view as to what's going on, who takes a liking to you, or your product, or your sales engineer.
In our case, that's legal. You make the legal team happy. They don't have a budget. But when it comes to regulatory compliance and so many other aspects, if you're not making them happy, they'll put a kibosh on whatever you put in front of them.
But I'm telling you, so there's other stakeholders who are crucial, that's very important, but then there's usually somebody who will step forward who wants to help you. It's often not your sponsor, by the way. So you want to be cultivating those coaching relationships. Those are the kind of people you can go and say, how do things get done here? Who has to, so we're now in the security review, the compliance people there, the information security people there, the COO's got a representative of that. What do they need to see to get through that process, that kind of thing. So back to your question, if you could repeat it, if you wouldn't mind. I just think it's a really important thing not to miss. If you think the sponsor is driving everything, you're not understanding what's going on in the organization.
No, I think the coach idea is a phenomenal idea, a really, really good idea. I was asking consensus decision making.
Yeah, it's almost non-existent, right? I mean, what happens is, we don't live in the command and control world never existed, right? The notion that people got orders and went and followed them some halcyon day in the past, where you find that one alpha dog decision maker who drives everything is nonsense, and things never work that way. You have a mix, but what you have is a highly politicized environment, oftentimes very dynamic, right? Reacting to a changing business. Now, I talked to a CEO. A CEO finds that a quarter of their schedule is completely out of control and unpredictable, right? So you're dealing with an environment that's sort of very fluid to begin with. So I think, give me this question. The question doesn't really work for me. Can you ask it in a different way? I think it's arch. Ask it in a different way if you don't mind.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm being honest with you.
No, it's okay. My mind's a little slow. I've been up for a lot of hours at this point in the day. I guess the key thing that I'm trying to zone in on is how often is consensus decision making prevalent, or how often does consensus decision making take place?
If you find a place that does consensus, help them do consensus. The point is to understand how they make decisions and what's driving them. There's this idea called the Fox, which is out of another sales methodology. There's actually the only good thing out of that sales methodology. And what you find is that when you get to know an organization well, if you actually know it, because most salespeople don't bother to do this stuff. They're kind of racing, I'm going to go on to the next thing, and they don't really sell deeply. You'll find there's a small number of people in senior leadership and operationally who make things happen. Sometimes they're like the chief lieutenant of a COO or VP of sales. They're people who are doers, and you find them by finding out about the other big projects that have been done. When you're in with your prospects, say, what other big initiatives have been done in the past 5 years like this? So you're selling technology or software or consulting. And then say, well, who drove that? Who's involved? And you find the big initiatives in a company, time and time again, are driven by the same people. And if you don't have a Fox behind you, and it's also can be really scary because you find out the sponsor who you think has all the power, the last 3 initiatives they sponsored were, what I call Q5 deals.
Good answer. The next area that we're going to kind of get to here is more on the procurement side. I think anybody who has been out there knocking on doors of bigger companies has probably had that wonderful situation.
I'll be short.
You definitely can, but it's had that wonderful situation where all of a sudden, like, procurement comes out of left field, and you're like, hey, oh, you're involved in this too now. So my question being, and I think especially it's relevant to this audience, because I know I definitely sometimes will face this, but how do you pass the procurement sniff test? And it's funny because this is one question a lot of you guys asked me about, but what I mean by that, to elaborate, is when you're selling into a big company, they're gonna have a certain bar, but they're gonna say, you've gotta meet this criteria. Legally, you've gotta hit this, limitations, liability, indemnifications, et cetera, et cetera. How do you pass that procurement sniff test if you're like a 5-year-old company that, maybe just got your Series A or something like that?
Well, first of all, you have to be realistic. Some companies won't buy from a startup for a given need because it's just too much risk. So don't waste your time. But what the thing to do is ask as the procurement person, have there ever been exceptions made to this? Invariably, the answer is yes. So there are exceptions. So how does an exception get done? So you don't buy from companies that haven't been in business for more than 5 years, or doesn't have more than 5 million revenue, or can't show us clean financials with whatever. So you do. So what really happens is the business people make this decision, right? So the first mistake you make is treating procurement like a positive gate. They're a negative gate. They can say no, they can't say yes, right? And treating them like a buyer is something I never do. I treat them like an annoyance. And I'm like, why are you asking me these questions?
And now for a slightly different view. Right. I think it's important to give another perspective here. We actually go out of our way to go to procurement conferences, and one of the reasons why we do that, in the space we're in, procurement does serve a role. They can be blockers, they can be killers, but also because we do things at scale. We're able to show some cost savings at any procurement person if they're into agency services or maintaining a global P&L, and they can see that through one of the services, if we go across an enterprise, can actually save them a few bucks, then they get the bonus. So we actually, some of our best opportunities came out of going to procurement-based conferences. I'm also going to tell you that you get a different set of frustrations, because usually once you get a no in there, it's hard to reverse anything. And procurement people aren't necessarily good at telling you why you did not get something. So they'll be collaborative to an extent, and then to them it's a matter of dollars and cents at some point, and they will shut down. So there's a pro and a con, but we actually go out of our way to address procurement people, because at times it's been quite beneficial to us.
That's actually really interesting, because I know both you guys have some pretty strong opinions. It sounds like definitely into the spectrum.
Issues, I would do the same exact thing. Procurement's not a stakeholder in buying enterprise technology.
Yeah, if I was selling
If I'm selling a
technology,
procurement system,
I would not go to a procurement person.
It's really neat because you guys are on the same page on that topic. I totally retract what I just said.
No, but there's somebody in this audience who actually watched me bully procurement at JP Morgan Chase and hang up on them and get a deal done as a result. Don't kid yourself. These guys are not as powerful as you think. If you got to get back to the business sponsor and say, they're stopping you from getting the value, go fix it. I've got a reasonable deal with him. You'd be amazed what a business person can pull off with procurement. I'm just saying, I'm not just being show up here. If you treat these people like they hold your fate in their hands to your own detriment.
I do think you can make your life easier with procurement by, one, being respectful of the question. But also,
Where are the contracts?
absolutely, but also giving them some gifts along the way. Like, their job is to take the contract they're given and make it better for the company, right? And to the extent that you go into that negotiation with 2 or 3 things that you know you can give, it makes your life a lot easier. I've seen emails from procurement after I've done deals with procurement people to their boss, right, about the bonus thing, like to their boss saying, like, I negotiated these 4 things off of Brian, aren't I great? Right? And I'm happy to do it, because those were things that I actually didn't really stand that firm on.
Got it. Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I'll tell you what, guys, we're down to about the last 5 or 10 minutes of our evening. And so at this time, I want to definitely open up the room for Q&A. Ask these guys any questions around managing the enterprise deal. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I have a question. So funny story, I actually worked for ZocDoc for about 4.5 years. I sat right next to Brian. So anything,
Hey Pat, how are you?
anything smart he says, I take full credit for it. So now I'm a VP of sales, so now I'm kind of focused more on like the managing aspect of it. And just talking to you guys, I actually don't like the term manage, right? Because I mean, if we're dealing with enterprise sales, we're talking about anything, it's like what I consider enterprise sales, anything's like 6 months and on, right, as far as the sales cycle goes. I could be wrong on this, but the thing is, the people who are doing enterprise sales are much more experienced sales reps, right? And so like, how much am I managing my reps, more or less brainstorming them, or like basically helping them get over like certain sales hurdles? Because Brian, I've had this discussion with you before, and like, I mean, you even said if somebody came in and actually micromanaged your team, like you guys at ZocDoc were doing much more of, you know, like getting together in a group, huddling up and figuring out what's working for everybody else, and then it's like more of a brainstorming session rather than managing. And you said if somebody came in and started changing things around and micromanaging you, it would actually demotivate you. And so the thing is, like, the biggest thing I don't want to do is I don't want to demotivate my reps, and I don't want to come across the guy who's sitting over their shoulder trying to manage it. I always tell my reps, listen, if it's to the point where, you know, like you're getting to be like it's a problem, I don't think you're working, you're just not going to work here anymore, right? And I think probably a lot of us here are in startups, and startups don't have the time to like sit and wait to see if you're going to work out. You're just going to work out or not, right? And so, like my question to you guys is like, how much do I have to feel like I'm managing, more as like a person who's like guiding them through like the parts that I know how to get through already, you know, and kind of going with that approach.
Definitely. Did you have somebody specific?
That's just for anybody, or I call it Brian.
Well, you got to trust who you hired, right?
Yeah.
But then again, you got to wear a lot of different hats, and you know, to every sales leadership job, there's a little bit of trust, and there is a little bit of micromanaging, and there's a little bit of coaching, and there's a little bit of accountability, or a lot of bit of accountability. So, I mean, we only consider it micromanaging if someone's pushing something down on us and it's usually not working, right? If they're pushing something down on you and you're generating revenue off of it, I don't think you're going to call it micromanaging. So it's a perception.
Gotcha.
I mean, just to add to that, if managing senior salespeople is really hard. My first time I did it, I failed miserably at it.
Yeah.
Basically, senior salespeople are almost unmanageable. So what I decided to do was make them accountable for just a certain level of activity number. And basically, I told the guy, listen, if you're above your number, I'll leave you alone. If you're not, I'm gonna be all over you. So reduce pain, get above number, or don't, and have me in your chili. And then I expect to see, because you're such a pro, right? I want to see the right level of activity.
Right, and I was
right?
my question solely
no, but I mean, a lot of people
enterprise
peddle this
sales.
mythology that they're really great sales reps because they've got 5 or 7 years or 8 years under their belt.
Right.
Just trust but verify. Great, show me what you're doing, what you spend your time doing. Let's take a look at your calendar. Let's see the activity, let's see the deals. If you're doing all the right things, I'm out of your way.
And someone else is going to think that's being micromanaged.
And that's just called management, right?
Any other questions? Any other questions on managing the enterprise sales though, or just in general? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so this idea that the modern process to do sales starts with marketing, generating leads, then sales development, qualifying the leads, then account executive taking them and over. That's kind of the ideal process in 2015, right? I'm curious how many of you actually have that process. So it's particularly Dan and I don't know if your name is ZocDoc. Brian, sorry.
Brian.
If you've implemented that process, if you think it's not applicable to you, or if you heading towards that but not there yet, so on.
Yeah, heading towards it, not there yet. We just recently hired a VP of marketing who has started lead generation efforts, which we are starting to qualify and score, and are now tracking to see how we did in that scoring, and we'll use that as a guide to generate more of those type of leads. But,
And you have the sales dev team qualifying them as the next step.
Yep, exactly. Yep. But we're only, I'd say, 2 months into that.
My group at ZocDoc's pretty close to that, not fully there yet. I mean, I started at ZocDoc 3 years ago, and I was the second guy on my team. We're now 21 people, so we've got, probably don't have a lot on the front end with lead generation, but a lot on the back end with account management and things like that.
Can I just offer a contrary thought here? I just suggest you go out and ask buyers and clients how much they like having an inside salesperson, an SDR, a sales rep, an account manager, a project manager, and how about a renewal rep now if we got? Go ask them how much they like it.
Okay, anybody else have questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, for Jason, you said that you crashed a procurement.
I didn't crash. We actually paid to attend, but yeah.
And so as attendees, you went. Can you tell me a little bit about the process?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you about these two conferences. Okay, so, what's that?
Inside the heart of darkness.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's quite the partying crew, let me tell you. So, you know, there's a conference out there called ProcureCon, and they run a lot of different laugh if you want. You know, so they run a number of different types of conferences that range anywhere from healthcare to direct and indirect and all things in between. So we've attended one which is essentially targeted towards agency services for the past couple of years. We've presented on a content track, so you know we're not just sitting in an audience, but also you know doing some thought leadership as well. And that's led to some opportunities. And the other one we go to is, you know, the A&A. I mean, if you're calling on top marketers, you got to consider the A&A as being a part of your routine. You know, they run called the financial. It's the financial leadership conference that they run. Thank you. And we go to that, and we again this past year we actually provided some content and. You know, otherwise you're just a cold calling company to someone who is being pestered all day long with cold calls as well as what they're supposed to do on a daily basis. So if you catch them out of the office, even if it's for a couple of days, and you get the opportunity to plant some seeds in their head that they wouldn't necessarily ever entertain if they were behind their own desk, you'll be able to you'll be able to move the ball a little bit. And that's one of the.
Was that trivial? I mean, you made it sound as if it's off your center base.
It's atypical. Well, I'll tell you, we go to them and we don't see anyone else who's in our space attending. I mean, you know, so
it's not your sweet spot, right?
Well, no, but they can be influencers and they are
able
designers.
to get on the content. In other words.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you know. There's this little term called pay to play. I mean, we may all hate that, but if it's the right room, you should be willing to do some marketing spend against it.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Glenn, it's my experience that everybody needs a coach. I don't care at what level you are, and if you're the most senior person, I would suggest that you get your people to coach one another. You know, that nobody is that good that they don't need support.
You may have misunderstood what I meant, but I think there's a misunderstanding here. I don't think that people don't need coaches. Everybody can use a coach. In fact, that's the sales management model. There is actually a coach, not manager, right? So getting back to your point over there. But I was talking about a very different context. So if you were mapping out the people involved in a decision-making process for a deal you were working on, you'd see this as an executive sponsor, right? That's the person who owns the P&L typically, right? Where this is going to go. They have the final control over their budget, even though they probably don't have discretionary control over releasing that budget, right? There's a process they have to go through to allocate budget and spend. But within the organization, you'll find there are people who will come forward to you as a rep when you're dealing with them and give this little piece of advice. You almost know what I'm talking about. That somebody will just say something in a conversation and give you really a lot of help. They identify themselves. You can't make somebody be your coach. The person who's helpful to you is telling you what's going on, gives you insights about the process. Oh, you know, this guy's about to be fired. Whoa, there's a reorg coming, right? I don't know, everybody's panicked about this quarter, right? These are the kind of things you want to listen very, very carefully to, okay? Because, and your executive sponsor, they don't care about you. The coach is somebody who shows you through the behaviors that they want to help you win. And that's what I meant. Is that clear?
Yeah.
All right, great. Yes, sir. I'm going to let you be the last question of the night.
Thank you. I will speak for everyone then.
It's got to be a good question, I guess, right? No pressure. No pressure.
We talked a lot about the macro and some of the tactics. What about back to the sales skills? Asking good questions and going for the personal wins. And how much does that impact, you find, with an enterprise sales where you're talking to so many different people? How important are those qualities?
Did you have a particular panelist that you wanted to direct that question to?
Somewhere over in there.
We'll take it. We'll take it. Dan may.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's crucial, particularly with startups, right? I think when you're selling something innovative, I mean, if you've all read The Challenge of Sale, if you haven't read it, I think you should go read it, which is really challenging the way that they operate today. And that skill set is hard because, I go in and I meet with clients or prospects and I say, the way that you're operating this aspect of your business is completely unacceptable. I mean, that's how I start a meeting, right? And there's a lot of art to that, right? Because you can say that and upset a lot of people, right? And so I think with startups, with innovative sales, when you're a small company, they don't know you, they don't trust you, they don't like you, the way that you break through that is like challenging their comfort level. Like I want them to go to sleep tonight not comfortable because they haven't fixed this aspect of their business yet. And I think that stylistically, I've found that the people that are really successful that I've been around, particularly again in startup sales and innovative sales, use that, like aggressively challenge their current state.
Yeah, I also adhere to the challenger sale model. I think that's great, especially when you are a startup. You have to give people a reason to question what they're doing and why they might need to consider working with a company that they had never heard of until very recently. And I think once you get them to actually consider you by challenging them, I think then it's extremely important to listen. And I know it's cliche in sales, but I see so few people actually do that well. They talk so much about their features that they miss things, like you were pointing out, who could be that potential coach in the room. So I think listening is probably, and just hearing, listening, writing down and understanding what that person across the table or on the phone is going through on a day-to-day basis is probably the most important takeaway, because then that guides your follow-up and the solutions that you're going to put forth in the future.
Going back to being able to say whatever you guys are doing is not right or can be done better. The only thing I'm going to say is what I'll encourage everyone on my team to do is to do your homework ahead of time. So it's okay to have an opinion, and it might even be the wrong opinion, but someone is going to measure you based on how you came to that rationale and that conclusion, rather than them expecting you to know everything that goes on inside their organization. So if you're going to say there are things that you guys could be doing better, you sure as hell better be able to, articulate as to the hows and whys. And that open is going to determine the success of the meeting, and all the other questions that we need, all those probes, all those qualifications, they may or may not happen based upon whether someone trusts that first opening paragraph that you're providing to them. And I'm here because we think you can be doing things better, and here's why we think you can be doing things better, and get them into a conversation. And if the conversation starts rolling, all the questions should come out as a result.
Yeah, don't try this tomorrow necessarily.
No,
They're fine,
don't
right?
back off. It's absolutely right. You got to be provocative. You got to punch through so much noise. You better be able to back it up. But even if you can't, you still got their attention. Don't try to be loved. Right? People don't. I've had 3 deals done with people who hated me, absolutely hated me. Okay, and the money spent just as good. Right? So the last point is, don't get me wrong. The personal aspect is everything in sales. This is the foundation of everything you do. If you don't have the basic skills of how to speak to people, how to listen, it's crucial, right? How to build rapport, how to use communication strategically with people, how to understand what's going on with them. Where are they at? Are you making eye contact? Here's a simple technique. I'll give you some value you can take out of this. Next time you're in a meeting with a person where it's not going right, just kind of slow down talking and just mirror their body language. Just mirror their body language. Just act like they are. Speak in the way they do. Get your body posture, your cadence, or anything exactly as they are. If you don't have the basics of communication established, if you don't like people, if you're some misanthrope just getting through this, go into accounting or development, be an engineer, okay? Don't be in sales. You better like people. I love people. Mark and I just went out and did this guerrilla marketing thing we're doing at trade shows. We're just wild cold calling. We took 75 pictures in 4 days. It's instant on. You've got to be able to connect to people and get through to them, and then make the kind of statements that Brian talks about. So if you don't have your basic personal selling skills down, communication, you're not going to get anywhere. You're just going to keep fumbling through. So get those down first.
Going back to the comment about you don't have to be liked. It's nice, but someone told me this a long time ago. Jason, if they're letting you into their office, they know that you're there to try to sell them something. Okay? So if you don't remember that, and I don't know how many folks in here, and I'm sure we all have our observations. Someone goes through, does an amazing proposal, presents their proposal, does great, then they finally get to the dollar figure at the end, and all of a sudden there's a stutter. All of a sudden someone is incapable or taking a deep breath before they let out the figure. Well, shit, what were you there for? You were there, everything was to lead up to that one moment. So, they know that you were there to sell them something. You're still supposed to be able to connect with what their needs are to what you hopefully have to offer. But it's not a matter of like, it's a matter of match.
And again, that was our last question of the night. I can't thank you guys enough for joining us. Big thank you to all the panelists. Round of applause. Shout out to our sponsors, McCarter and English, thank you so much for giving us money to do this. Workbench, thank you for giving us space. Bowery Capital, thanks again for those checks. And Betts Recruiting, we appreciate you guys setting up the bar. If anybody's in transition or looking for recruiters or anything like that, those fine people at that table over there can help you out. Our next event is March 17th, Negotiating the Deal. Mike, please ask them to place bottles and trash in appropriate bins or else. This was a note handed to me. So do us a favor, please put those recyclables in the recycling. Love Mother Nature.